Welcome back to The Explainer. I kind of want you to lower your volume just a bit and lean in, because today we're taking a fascinating and honestly deeply unsettling journey. We are going to dissect 6 deeply disturbing, completely true events that will absolutely challenge your entire perception of safety. We aren't looking at supernatural ghost stories or Hollywood movie scripts here. Instead, we're analyzing the raw anatomy of true terror. Those chilling moments when the absolute mundane suddenly turns malignant.
Better luck next time. Just let those 4 words hang in the air for a second. We're going to explore how a handwritten note carrying this exact taunt completely shattered someone's life. It's a simple phrase, right? It's something you might say after a friendly game. But as we know, context is everything. And the context of this specific quote, well, it's going to set the perfect, terrifying stage for our entire exploration today. Because this wasn't left on a gym locker or a car windshield. No, this chilling note was found on the front door of a police officer at his own private home. I mean, imagine being the one person society relies on for protection, coming home to your ultimate sanctuary, only to realize that threat actually followed you right up to your front porch. It completely shatters our fundamental assumption of safety, which brings us perfectly to our first major theme of this explainer. Section 1. Anatomy of True Terror, the Psychology of Fear. Okay, let's dive into this. We need to understand why true horror rarely lives in abandoned asylums or haunted houses. It actually thrives in the spaces we assume are completely safe. When that illusion of security is stripped away from our everyday environments, our brains just go into complete overdrive. Section 2. Violation of safe spaces. The illusion of security. Let's start with what should be the ultimate safe haven, a high school classroom. Our first account comes from a student who was just a junior at the time, sitting comfortably in a carpeted, second-floor, third-hour history classroom. Without any warning, no intercom announcement, nothing, the teacher suddenly declares a lockdown. Desks are shoved to the back, lights are killed, and everyone is huddled in the dark. They had no idea what was happening. They assumed it was just a drill, until a shadow appeared in the small window of the classroom door. And this is where the sheer panic sets in. The students are just watching this shadow, totally unable to tell if it's a man or a woman, and then 5 deafening, aggressive bangs hit the locked door. It wasn't a polite knock, someone was actively trying to break it down. After that 5th bang, the shadow left, and there were exactly 30 agonizing seconds of dead silence. I mean, not a pin dropping. But then, the violent thudding shifted entirely to a completely different wall of the classroom. The unseen attacker was out there testing different angles, trying to find a way in. The lockdown eventually ended, but you know what the really terrifying part is? The school never explained it, it never made the news, and they never, ever found out who was trying to break in. So, moving to our next account, let's see how this builds on that idea of violated safety. This takes us back to that rookie police officer we mentioned who was working the night shift. He pulls over a speeding car, leading to a brief chase that ends with the suspect ditching the vehicle into a ditch and just sprinting into the dense, dark woods. But this wasn't a normal traffic stop. The car had no license plates. Actually, scratch that. It had no plates and no VIN either. The interior was completely, eerily empty of any personal belongings. It wasn't reported stolen, and what little they could trace went back to a massive, rundown used car lot that didn't even know the car was missing. Extensive canine unit searches yielded absolutely nothing. The suspect literally vanished into the dense woods without a single trace. Which brings us right back to this horrifying quote. Because days later, the officer, who had no security cameras and whose address was entirely private, returned home from a shift to find this exact handwritten note on his front door. The suspect from the woods didn't just escape the police, he somehow tracked the specific arresting officer back to his personal off-duty sanctuary, just to leave a taunt. The sheer psychological dominance required to pull that off is absolutely staggering. And, spoiler alert, the case was never solved. Section 3. Terrors of the abandoned, the allure of the forgotten. There is a real primal allure to forgotten places, but they carry a deep, inherent risk. Our next source account details a photographer visiting his grandfather in a dusty, dying town in northwestern Texas. It's a place mostly abandoned by petrol companies. Wanting to capture the rusting remains of the town, he steps out onto the porch in the dead of night to take some photos of the incredibly clear, dark sky. So were they watching him? Because almost immediately, a junky car comes screeching down the road with its music blasting and headlights glaring. But instead of driving past the corner, it stops right at the cross street in front of the house. The driver abruptly kills the headlights, but leaves that loud music blaring. and the photographer felt it. You know that intense, heavy feeling of being watched in the pitch black? He rushed inside, locked the door, and the second he did, the car's headlights snapped right back on and it screeched away. The photographer was left agonizing over whether he had just accidentally put his grandfather's house on the radar of a local drug ring, forever ruining the safety of that home. Now, what's really interesting here is this 30-minute window. It perfectly maps out a rapid escalation of terror that changed a group of high school friends forever. At 9 p.m., they leave a YMCA gym. At 9:15 p.m., walking through a completely dead strip mall, they find the back door of an abandoned Blockbuster Video propped open with a small piece of wood. At 9:20 p.m., giving into curiosity, they enter the pitch-black back room, using only a phone flashlight to see the eerie, empty shelves. But at 9:25 p.m., the real horror starts. They hear heavy noises and footsteps approaching them from the back of the store. By 9:30 p.m., they are sprinting blindly in the dark, bumping into each other, bursting out the back door, and scrambling up a hill. And the worst part? They're listening to the abandoned store's door open behind them as a man actively chases them into the night. Section 4. Facing the unseen, the terror of the unknown. That adrenaline-fueled chase is terrifying, sure, but at least they could hear their pursuer. So what happens when the threat is entirely invisible? The profound anxiety of the unknown is arguably the most potent fear of all. And we see this brilliantly illustrated in an account from a young person who lived on an isolated family farm, whose daily chore was rolling hay down a hill for the grazing cows. After repeatedly finding the mean gate inexplicably open, the narrator took matters into their own hands. First, they secured the farm gate with a brand new padlock, keeping the only key right in their pocket. The next morning, in the early pre-dawn darkness, they went out to feed the cows. That's when they noticed the cows inexplicably freezing. Instead of running for the hay like they had for years, the animals refused to move. They refused to go anywhere near the gate area. They were paralyzed by something the narrator literally couldn't see. And then comes the horrifying discovery. The newly locked gate, the one with a brand new lock and the key safe in their pocket, was somehow standing wide open again. The cows knew something was there, but the narrator was completely blind to it. And this invisible threat extends into the digital world as well. Our final account involves a man who met an attractive woman at a bar, had a great conversation, and got her number. The next morning, feeling bold, he calls it. But a man with a deep, booming voice answers and just flies into a completely unhinged rage. The caller tries to apologize, explaining it was a wrong number, but the voice on the other end threatened to hunt him down and beat him. After hanging up, the unseen man sent 10 violently threatening texts in exactly 2 minutes. The man had to block the number, forever left wondering who this aggressively violent stranger was and why the woman had intentionally handed over the number of an absolute psychopath. Section 5. The horror of no closure. Monsters uncaught. So the crucial point is, when you look at all of these source accounts together, a distinct, deeply unsettling pattern emerges. We've talked about violated sanctuaries, abandoned spaces, and unseen threats, but there is one unifying element that elevates every single one of these accounts from a mere spooky story into the realm of true, lingering terror. It's the horror of no closure. The monsters were never caught. Just look at how these events ended. In the high school lockdown, the shadow banging on the doors was never identified. In the abandoned Blockbuster, the man chasing the teenagers escaped unseen. During the police pursuit, the driver who left the taunting note vanished into the woods and remained totally uncaught. And at the farm gate, the invisible trespasser who terrified the livestock was completely unexplained. In every single instance, the perpetrator wasn't a ghost. It was a real, physical human being with malicious intent. And in every single instance, they were never brought to justice. They just slipped right back into the general population. Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder today. When you lock your doors tonight and settle into your own safe sanctuary, ask yourself, what is truly more terrifying? The threat you can look directly in the eye, or the very real monster that is still out there, entirely unknown, just waiting for their next opportunity? Think about that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay safe, and I will see you next time.